is the Diary of a Lady Band Director podcast, brought to you by the Passion Is Network.
A little bit. A little bit.
What about now? I heard my echo, so I think that's a yes. Y'all can hear me? Thumbs up. Bet. All right. Woo. This topic was so good, we had to do a part two. Y'all remember Hot Shots Part 2? Am I that old? It was like,
no.
Come on.
So funny.
We are all millennials. So I think this is the perfect show for us because everybody on the screen is a millennial. Tori, you a millennial? You're like first gen. No, because I'm old too.
First gen, like he an iPhone.
First gen? Okay, so I'm born in 1981, so I'm like the first gen iPhone millennial. Like, we grew up with computers. Like, we know life without computers. We know life without the phones. I had a rotary phone in my house. We remember Rolodexes where you had to write people numbers down. Go figure. And memorize their numbers. Yeah, we dating ourselves. Cybil, don't you look over there like you... All right, I'll let you be great, Cybil. Don't you look over there. Cybil,
I need that
trifling.
Shirt. I need that shirt.
Yeah, wait a minute. What up? Hold on. What that say?
Sound machine.
Y'all got merch.
Yes.
Look at Michael Simmons over there like peasants. We don't have to have a shirt.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Wait.
No, they got a shirt with all the band directors on it, Krystal. You got that way wrong.
I didn't even say anything. I didn't even say anything.
Your face said it. Your face said peasants. Like, I felt the peasant vibe just by how you looked to the left.
No, you know what? Whatever. I'll let you have it. I'm not gonna argue.
It's okay. It's okay. We know y'all are the greatest. We know. Playing for people who got real money. You know, some of us on the chicken circuit, and y'all like playing for real venues, traveling and stuff.
It's all good.
It's so cool. We all aspire to be like family. Like, people don't admit it. We give y'all help. Like, no, I'm a be the first to admit. I'm gonna admit it today on Beyonce's Grammy award-winning internet that we really aspire to have the same type of clout that FAMU got. We do. That's why we give y'all so much hell. That's for real. It's like admiration. Now, listen, I'm not gonna be like Lauren. I'm not gonna be like Cybil looking all the way into the sky. I'm gonna admit that we actually admire a lot of the works of FAMU. You know, like that. I forget what that theme from The Young and the Restless. That thing gave me life.
Nadia's theme.
Nadia's theme. The way that
I will say that I'm really proud of everything that the band program has accomplished. Especially this current band had some public as well as hidden adversities that they had to deal with. So I'm super proud of everything that they are doing and have done and will do in the future. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'll take the compliment to say thank you.
Yeah, we real proud of y'all. You know, y'all defected from the MEAC, went to the SWAC.
It had nothing to do with us.
But it's cool. It's cool. Y'all we still claim y'all. That's what I'm gonna say. We still claim y'all. We still love y'all. It's good. It's good.
Well, forgive the echo. I think a lot of family, most of us, we still kind of be acting hard. So I never SWAC. We did a few SWAC schools every now and then, Grambling and Jasper State. But just being real, I'm still kind of be acting hard. Even though we in the SWAC, even that celebration, I was for NCCU. So as much as I'm a SWAC guy, I was just like, yes.
I gotta tell y'all, go ahead and hit that like button. Listen, I hit my own like button. I ain't afraid to say it. I hit my own like button. I like my own statuses. If you don't like you, then why should somebody else like you? So if you just joined us, I see Lamek's videos in here, always supporting. And we're gonna get right to it because this is about to be fun because it's nothing but the middle guard. The middle guard is on the screen. So we don't ever get a voice. I'm gonna stop. I feel like we don't get a voice. I think everybody around us, the old guard and the new guard, get a lot to say. And then we kind of have to just kind of swim somewhere in the background doing a lot of work. So that's that. So hopefully you hit the like button. I got put on my Jay. Shout out to the people who are at TMEA. Conference is happening right now. I have to pick and choose what conference I can go to because I can't be flying, 2 times a month. I can only afford like 1 time a month. I ain't got money like that. Despite what David Norman, BandTube, says, he always acting like us Marylanders got a bunch of money. We ain't got like all that money because, our cost of living is higher. But anyway, welcome to the Diary of a Lady Band Director, the only woman podcast on air that talks about everything band and music education, all from the view of women and occasionally our special guests. As usual, we love sharing the stage with our dedicated viewers to gain more insight and to encourage dialogue throughout. We like civil discourse. This is not about agreeing. It's about perspectives. So if you want to share your insight throughout the podcast, a link will be provided and pinned to the comments that at an appropriate time, you may be able to join and mic up and say what you got to say, share what you got to share, to the benefit of civil discourse and academic dialogue. So without further ado, we are on episode 28, part 2, since we referenced Hot Shots. Part 2, the old guard versus the new guard, featuring people who are the middle guard. And there's a question that is about to go in the chat, and I'm gonna just kick it off. And the way we do it is you put the church finger up, and if you want to add to somebody, just jump in. This is not like I was gonna say a presidential debate, but this is probably way more organized. All right, so the question is, what are the major disconnects between the old guard, and when we say old guard, we're talking about baby boomers and Gen X. And when I say Gen X, some of us are kind of in between. Xennials, I think me and Tori are more like the exennial. We're like millennials that are on the cusp. So, millennials, y'all know who y'all are. And of course, the new guard would be like really, really young millennials, like 30. All right. I think millennials are like 34 now. So, Lauren, I think you're kind of on the cusp. You might be on the cusp and you don't know it.
No,
Lauren
I'm a
looking like-
millennial. I'm a middle millennial.
You're a middle millennial, and then the Gen Zers, which hopefully we'll have a Gen Zer on later on. So, what is the disconnect, y'all? And in the band world, what's the disconnect? Because I'm not gonna ask, is there a disconnect? Because there is. What is the disconnect between all the generations? And
I mean, I'll be the first to kick it off, I guess, but the large disconnect between those generations reflect the same disconnect that exists in society in general. The values are different, and if the values are different, then ultimately our goals are different. Um, I think Gen X baby boomers, their focus was the field show, and stand stuff happens later. Um, and I think that Gen X and baby boomers were a little bit better about spreading the love between marching and other ensembles. And as we see, like very recently, a lot of young millennials and a lot of Gen Z are the marching band side is more heavily looked at, more heavily preferred. Whereas I can't say that they completely ignore. I can't say that they completely ignore other ensembles, but I think that young millennials and Gen Z know where their bread is buttered. So there are, I guess, a number of factors that contribute to that. And so I'm sitting here in the middle, and I can actually see and understand where both sides are coming from. But though that disconnect is generally there, and then when you look at our who the collegiate band directors are versus the high school band directors versus the middle school directors, the public school directors, you start to kind of see a disconnect, especially when it comes to students coming from their K-12 experience and going to their collegiate experience. You really start to see the difference in not only the directors but the students as well. So yeah, it just basically reflects the values that each one of those generations came up under.
and that's interesting. It's like it seems like it's value based. Like whatever. Um, I think for millennials, for me, we were influenced by the values of the old guard, and so we kind of hang on to them like they're like a precious gem that
Yeah.
we just can't let. I can't let go of it because it shaped me. You know what I mean? Even if some stuff I didn't understand or agree with, it shaped me. That's me personally. So there's even stuff that I just can't let go of. Um,
I think
I don't know
that's
anybody else.
that's to be expected from any generation. You hold on to what you know. And it takes work to address what it is that you know, figure out what's positive, what's negative, and it takes work to peel through all that and take chew the meat and spit out the bones. Growth takes work.
Growth takes work. Um, what about Lauren? What you think? What's the disconnect?
There are a lot of factors. I think one of the biggest things when I was listening to Tori talk, we have social media now, and with social media comes the instant gratification and the seeing the seeing of the end of a product. And I think what the newer generation, um, the new guard, they think, oh, I could just do this with a band program, and I'll become a band director, and boom, I can have a good program. I could be like a certain program and do the things they do, and yeah, I'll be successful. And there's a lot of work in being a band director. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of politics, a lot of paperwork, a lot of administrative things, a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that people do not see. I also think the biggest disconnect, and I think where the middle guard, we kind of, for lack of a better term, we kind of got screwed because we were taught by the old guard, and then we expected to go in as, teaching students as, like the old guard taught us. But then the rules for education, a lot of things changed in education, and it kind of what do I want to say? It kind of backfired on us. So instead of music educators being able just to do band, like band directors were able to just do band, now they have to be, extra substitute teachers for like the quote unquote core classes, like reading, math. They have to incorporate papers in their band classes for whatever reason. Me and my elementary school band director, who was a high school band director now, we had this conversation last week. He said they wanted me to have them write papers for band. Like, for what? We play. And, it's a VPA program. So a lot of the rules changed for us. And also, there's so many things. But yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is social media. Just seeing it. And that's how we went from being field bands. We were brought up doing field shows. Field shows made the band, but now in marching band, but now it's like, who's the best in the stands? Now we have a 0 quarter along with the 5th quarter. We've always had a 5th quarter. Now we have a 0 quarter. And, it's good that the culture changed, the band culture changed. I do like the concept of 0 quarter. But there's just a lot of work that goes into it. Also, it became, so under the old guard, a lot of band students that were in marching band, they were also in other ensembles. They were in concert band, they were in jazz band, wind ensemble. It seems like for a lot of people now on social media, the armchair band directors, it's not cool to do concert band. It's not cool to do jazz band. And I think that's one of the biggest disconnects. In order for your marching band to be successful, you have to be in those other ensembles to really learn your craft, to really learn how your instrument works, to see how versatile your instrument is, and bring that back to marching band to make a better marching band. So I think that's another disconnect. I feel like the new guard doesn't appreciate other types of music as much as they do marching band.
You said something key. I graduated, I don't know, Tori, when you graduated, and Cybil, when you graduated. I graduated in 2005. Should have been 04, but we music ed majors and HBCUs, we talked about that last week. I have 172 credits. So I graduated 2005, and the rules of engagement changed. I feel like I went in college from this, kids come to band. You take band for 4 years in high school. You take band for 2 years, 3 years in middle school. You start band in elementary school. I'd always been playing my instrument. And then I came out, and No Child Left Behind smacked me in the face. They had gotten rid of the arts programs. They had kind of went down to 1 and 2 arts teachers in a building, 2 if you're lucky. And I was like, what the is this? Like, I felt like I got smacked. And if you know anything about education policy, New York, most new initiatives start in the North. And so we felt No Child Left Behind before maybe Atlanta did or North Carolina did. And I can actually see trickle down of some of the initiatives that we have been that has plagued us from even post No Child Left Behind, starting to affect people down south. And they're like, what is this? How do they expect this? I was like, we've been doing this for two decades, almost 3 decades now. And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, because the initiatives come from New York and they get trickled down. And so you know, people always ask why the band programs in the North are like they are. I was like, we got hit with those laws early. So I don't know. There's a big disconnect. I think that one policy changed on us. I don't know anybody agree if you feel like policy changed. Like you got out of school and then band was not the way that band was when we were in school.
Yeah, policy change definitely affects everything that we do. Um, and like Lauren said, the presence of technology and social media, YouTube was the one, man. Um, I graduated in '06, and that was No Child Left Behind came out '07. And so, as educators, as a millennial educator, right smack dab in the middle, I think that one of the things that I learned early on was how to roll with the punches and try to make my program work by any means necessary. And most teachers do that. Most band directors do that. Your program has to work by any means necessary. Um, and so one of the things that I ended up looking at and I ended up doing was um, trying to implement actions in my classroom that reflected what was going on, while still trying to maintain that cyclical nature of a comprehensive band program. Full disclosure, I am a full-time high school band director and I'm a staff member of an HBCU. So it gives me an opportunity to look at what both programs require. And I will say that from the middle, that cyclical nature is still there, but it's changed a little bit because the landscape has gone for marching band being the bread and butter of everything. Um, Symphonic band, concert band, jazz band, all those other entities still have to be there, but now they overlap so much more than they used to. There was a time when marching band was the fall, that was it. There was maybe one or two parades, your MLK parade. Depending on where you were in the country, you'd go ahead and do your Mardi Gras parades. And then you'd go back to your concert, your symphonic setting in the spring. So fall was heavy marching band, maybe a little concert band, and then spring was heavy concert band and maybe a little bit of marching band, a couple of hits in between. But now we're getting to where we're seeing those two seasons, for lack of a better word, start to overlap. But the best programs that are still doing it in the K-12 arena, the best high schools that are still doing it, manage to have equity between the two, regardless of whether or not the seasons overlap. One high school like that just comes to mind right now is Jonesboro here in Georgia. Literally, we'll have a marching band practice right after a symphonic band practice. So those two seasons are starting to overlap. Um, and it's millennial band directors that are making sure that cyclical nature of music education is still there, but working it out to where it still caters to the community needs. That's one of those things that music educators deal with that your STEM educators aren't having to deal with. Is that the proof of our work is on display day in, day out. In the fall, our work is on display every Friday, right? A math teacher can go a whole semester without it being discovered that he's a bad math teacher. But if you are a band director, you gonna get found out on Friday night. Somebody's gonna know that you're not doing something. So um, I think that the cyclical, and I'm gonna keep saying it so it gets stuck in people's head. The cyclical nature of a comprehensive band program is one of those things that I think the middle guard does well. That the old guard had this one way of doing things, and as we change, if you're an educator, you never stop being educated, and so we kind of have to roll with those punches and consistently redesign our programs. I'm not saying you got to reinvent the wheel, but you got to shine that sucker up every now and again.
Um, is it my turn?
Yeah, it's your turn.
All right. Yeah. First off, I want to say that I think that everybody has made some very, very valid points on this topic, and I think everybody's correct. The second thing I want to say is that, forgive me if if I speak from who I am, which may be interpreted as fighting words to some other people. I'm just gonna go ahead and put that out there. in the beginning, because everybody's not going to like what I say, and maybe even ask, well, who is this guy? And that's whatever. But I'm going to speak the truth that I know it to be. I'm an educator first. And the reason why I consider myself to be an educator, because I remember where I come from. I didn't come from a very good band program, or rather a very big program, a comprehensive band program. I come from a town in the sticks in the country of South Carolina that nobody knows, but probably have driven through at some point. And we got 3 traffic lights. You know what I'm saying? Like, my band program was so small that, I was the lead trumpet player. And if I didn't show up to a performance, there was no trumpet. We were that small. And then, coming from a place like that, and then going to a place like Florida A&M, where we got 50 trumpets, we got 60 trumpets, it was a little bit of a culture shock to me, because I saw at a young age just how much more advanced that other people were. And this is me, having the ambition of being a music major. So I always teach my students from that place of the opportunities that I didn't get, that other people got from their programs. I think so much has just changed in the music education world for the past 20 or 30 years. And when we talk about this topic, we're mainly talking about music education in the Black community and the music education of Black students. So much has changed. Music has changed. When you look at the music of the 70s and 80s, they were so much complex than the music that we have today. Music that we have today are basically have gone from 5-note melodies to basically a drum beat, a drum break, and a hook. It's not a whole lot there. And this is the music that our scholars have to consume and that they know. They're not the students that consume Earth, Wind, and Fire on a regular basis, or any of those, bands from back in the 70s and 80s that, had a lot of sophistication in their sound. So, the music at large that people consume is very different today than what it was. So their musical depth is different. Their musical understanding is different. Another thing that has changed is that, a lot of people, especially not just in the music arena, but just in our community, they function in this disrespect culture. And that disrespect culture tends to drive a lot of what we do. And, at me being a middle school band director at this point in my life, I have to remind my students that, hey, what you say to somebody, you're not saying it from behind the screen. You're saying it to their face, so if you're going to say it, you better make sure you have some hands behind it, so don't just be thinking that it's cool to say whatever you want, because I'm from the generation where if you got something to say, all right, let's go outside behind this tree real quick and let's settle this. And we come back inside. That's where I come from. Another thing that I think that has happened over the past 20 years is we're dealing with the drumline effect. I think that the movie Drumline was the best thing to happen to bands, but also one of the worst things that happened to music education. I think everybody remembers in the movie, simply a movie, but you have a good program. And I think that immediately after that movie came out, that a lot of us, if you're in the classroom, you probably dealt with that, So from our students' perspective, those are influences that they have to deal with, that walk into our classroom and that we have to teach. I also think that there's a lot of divisiveness amongst our within our education community. Prior to this week, I didn't even know of the term old guard or new guard or middle guard. I didn't even know I was in it. So, these are new terms that are new to me. And when you think about those terms, it almost forces you to pick a side. And I think that what applies to the old guard also applies to the new guard, and what applies to the new guard also applies to the old guard. And what I mean by that is that you have some people that have the idea of pedagogy versus showmanship. I do consider myself more of a pedagogue than anything. because I develop students. I'm a middle school band director. And I personally feel that you have to be a better educator to teach middle school than high school, because if you're a high school director, and I've been a high school director, if you know what to do, when to do it, and you can hire the right people, you can be successful. And I think we've all seen very successful people in a high school band position or even a college position that weren't very good musicians, but they were good businessmen. They were good organizers. They were able to run an organization. But if you put them in front of a student and ask them to teach them how to play beautifully, then that's another issue. So, you know, if I say anything that offends somebody, I do apologize. But I personally believe that you got to be a better middle school teacher, a better teacher to teach middle school than high school, because how do you take a student from zero to all state? How do you take a student from zero to all state? That's very difficult to do. And it starts in middle school. So you have musicianship. And that's one area of divisiveness that exists within our music education community. You have musicianship versus cranking, or the cranking culture. And the cranking culture started becoming really, really popular around the early 2000s when I was coming into college and exiting college. And the definition of a good band to some people is not being able to play all 12 major scales and being able to play a lyrical and technical piece and be able to pass a college audition, but how loud you can play, you know, how loud you can make how much you can make the building shake. What's the highest note you can play on your instrument, you know? And you have those people who value or the other more than other. And you know, we're all human. We all tend to kind of
Michael, I think you froze. I don't know if you can hear me. But I'm gonna say Michael hit on, man. He want us to pass the collection plate. One, drumline changed the game for us in some good ways and some not so good ways to me, where it gave us exposure and it kind of gave us a little bit of a little respect on our name for stuff that had been happening for 20, 30 years. It also, I feel like it sensationalized and minimalized things that happen before you see a performance. I mean, they showed some of the process, but they didn't really show a lot of the process of how you spend so much time inside playing. You have to learn the music first, but all we saw was them out on that field, you know, choreography, you know, shimmying. And I'm like, so they just gonna skip the part that they actually read the music? I mean, they kind of highlighted it. And I remember kids in my classroom, like, because drumline came out when I was in college, like towards the end of my tenure. It came out. I remember we went to see like the opening, and I remember about 4 or 5 years later when I was finally a band director, kids was like, man, they did Nick Cannon wrong. I was like, y'all completely missed it. That's like, that boy was talented. He had that fire, man. I was like, he couldn't read. And it held him back. But that was the start of it. It was like he was good. And they put him in this class and he was bored. And that's how a lot of the students could identify with Nick Cannon to me. So Michael talking about, you know, the crank culture really started to be popular around the late 2000s. Like about, I would say 2009. By 2010, that baby was already in a stroller on his way to walking down the street. Go ahead, Lauren.
I hate to interrupt, but when you think about it, you're right, because that's when, you know, 04, we started having Battle Fest. Well, after Honda, there was, after Drumline, that's when Honda Battle the Band started. Then people started having their own Battle the Bands, like in North Carolina, there was Defeat the Beat. There was Crank Fest at Norfolk State. Then it was Crank Fest South at South Carolina State. Then gym battles started, which was interesting. You had gym battles between A&T and Norfolk State. You had gym battles between South Carolina State and Norfolk State. excuse me, that was like the end of the 2000s. So I guess it brought a bunch of opportunists, because that's when a lot of battle of the bands started. And I hate the way they do battle of the bands, because first of all, they call it first annual. It's not called first annual, it's inaugural. They have an inaugural battle of the bands that only lasts for like 1 or 2 years, and that's it. Like the promoters kept coming and started making money off of that. So it promoted more of the crank, having that that faster faster, I guess, product for marching bands. So yeah, that's how we got into the crank culture. All these battle of the bands that came from Drumline. So yeah.
And it's funny, we now call it crank culture. Like it has its own genre. Like it's own genre now. And I do like the fact that music evolves, and from one genre we got a new genre. I remember, I'm a 80s kid, early 80s, how hip hop was looked at. I remember growing up and people like, that's that rap crap. I remember my parents like, what are they saying? And and so to play devil's advocate, I do feel like maybe the new guard feels like weird, that old, especially the old guard. I feel like the millennials, we kind of can sway back and forth. But definitely the old guard, I think they're completely like, they kind of sound like our parents did, or grandparents, when rap came out. Oh, y'all listening to that's negative, that's provocative, blah, blah, blah. But if you go back and listen to the 70s and some of the songs, that stuff, it may have been more poetic, but it was saying sometimes the same thing. Man, wasn't talking about a girl. But because it was more covert, it was a little more acceptable. So just to play a little devil's advocate, I do kind of feel like the new guard probably feel like y'all are just the old people are out of touch. Y'all don't know what we like. You don't know what we listen to. We grew up with Drumline. In fairness, they grew up with Drumline as their introductory to HBCU band. I didn't know what HBCU bands were until I was in one. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have all that stuff. So I agree with, Lauren, when you kind of bring up the battle culture. The battle culture came from out of Drumline. It was present, but Hollywood sensationalized it and made it like, this is really what they do. And some of us, we kind of went with it, but we didn't know how big the battle culture was going to get, because we used to be able to kind of sit across the field, I'm dating myself, go toe to toe, and then sit in the cafeteria afterwards or before and chum it up. You almost can't do that now, because kids will be ready to fight the directors.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave that there. The directors can't act right.
I think not so much saying that, speaking as an educator, we have to recognize the music that, I don't want to use the word evolve, because evolve implies that something has improved. I don't want to use the word evolve. That would place people thinking one thing instead of the other. But music is a living, breathing organism. Right? And so if you look at music history, I can't stand music history. It's one class ever. I can't stand music history. Each one of these periods evolved from the one that came previous to it. So what we're saying is, we're a dominant crank culture, but let's be honest. It's a genre in and of itself. It has its own idiom. Similar to how HBCU culture is different from CWI culture. We all have our own idioms that go into what it is we do. We have to acknowledge that crank culture, for lack of a better term, crank culture does have its own going. It has its own idiomatic presence. It has its own creative genre in and of itself. And so I think one of the things that the old is missing is that just because the music is different doesn't make it work. Right? I'm very sure that at some point in the next 20 years, there are going to be studies kind of crank, right? Um, that said, there's room at the table for everybody, and pedagogy has a function. There is a way to do everything. That's what this whole crank function thing. Like a lot of music that we listen to today, and even the music that our parents listen to, came from a place where it was demonized by the people that came before it, and then it became popular music, and then it becomes the stuff that we study and that the next generation allows as the good old days. Um, that said, there is definitely a place, a time and a place for everything, and there's no reason that people who are involved in crank culture cannot have what's typically considered a characteristic sound for the instrument. I think that by drawing these divisive lines, that starts to make it seem like, for lack of a better word, it's the whole MEAC SWAC argument that we used to have back in the in the early 2000s. It's it's pretty much the exact same argument there, and I think that by being divisive about it, we really get nowhere. But as educators, it is important that we teach. It is important that we teach fundamental. It's important that we teach tone production, and like brother said before he got knocked off, the middle school teachers are the most important there. The middle school teachers have to be the stronger teachers. I did 10 years in middle school, so I know that struggle. Um, Taking a kid from zero to all state, but then once that kid gets to a point where they have the fundamental skills. I don't I'll be honest. I don't care if they go to a school that cranks. I don't care if they go to a school that has a stereotypical MEAC sound because they have that basic skill set, right? I can imagine how people ranked on Dizzy Gillespie because of his embouchure and because of the way that he approached music, because it did not fall within what they considered to be the box that needed to be in. And I'm not saying that it's somebody who advocates the whole, and who advocates the crank style because it's not what I do. But I have to admit that I have to respect those who do it and do it with some kind of pedagogy. There are some high school programs that their marching bands are cranking their behind off, and then when I walk into their band room in the spring, they're playing "Ride" by Samuel Hazel like it's nothing. And so that's where the disconnect is everybody thinks my way is the best way. No, no, no. Your way is a way.
I need the little. I don't have no little whatever. Civil. Don't you be over there taking notes for your classes and about to use us as a whole case study? I feel like we're about to be the topic of the week at North Carolina Central for music ed classes. But that's dope if it is, because that's kind of where I feel like modern education should be going, is stuff in the now. Cybil, what you think?
First of all, I got two screens. Oh, I hear myself. Okay. Yeah, I got two screens up, so if I look like I'm looking up, that's why. But I was writing things down as I heard you all speak, um, because I had some trouble trying to figure out what actually I thought the disconnects were, because I'm such a chameleon or a liquid, and I usually fit whatever glass I'm in. It's no problem. I don't like, friction, so I just do. But as far as Gen Z, I would say the work ethic has changed. The failure to apply technology when it comes to band, like they don't know how to use it for band, but they know how to use it for everything else. I guess that's because when you're using it for something like that, it's no longer fun. Um, Too much emphasis on social media, too much emphasis on being in front of the camera all the time. That affects everybody a different way. Some people might be nervous, some people might love it, and it might take them over. But I think that we need to go back to, leave the cameras alone. And it's not even just the person in charge. It's like the kids might have it in one hand and the trumpet in the other. Like, what in the world? I think that's one of the things. Um, I think there's a lot of quick to discredit when it comes to the new guard, without kind of seeking out, advice before, saying something or doing something. They feel like they have it all together. Um, Let me see what else. I'm trying to think. For the
Hey,
new guard
Cybil, you
also.
breaking up a little bit.
For the new guard also.
Can you hear me? You breaking up a little bit. And this is back to technology. You got a lot. If you got a lot of programs running on your computer, it might be slowing you down. It might be slowing you down.
I'm
So
on
just
my
check.
phone.
Like,
I'm on my phone.
you on your phone? You on the Wi-Fi or you on your data?
I don't even know.
All right. It's Lauren said it sounds fine to me. You just kind of crackle.
Yeah, it's Cybil. You're fine on my end.
It might be my
It's
other
this
computer.
daggone Mac.
It might be my other computer.
No, it's probably my Mac. I hate.
Yeah, because
I need
Krystal,
new
you're
stuff.
freezing now.
But yeah, everything is recorded. And I just think it's out of hand because we're so focused on trying to do something for somebody else versus doing it because that's what you're supposed to do. Like the era is one that's not going to do it unless somebody's looking. And I don't know about anybody else, but when I was in undergrad, um, I loved band so much. I didn't care. I mean, cameras weren't a thing, but I did not care. I gave it 100% every time on the field in a regular practice. I wasn't waiting to the game. And I think a lot of kids these days are waiting to be seen, and that's why they have so many injuries and running out of breath. Okay. Um, as far as the middle guard, I think we are like this. We got our arms this way, and the new guard stretching us this way, and the old guard is pulling us this way, and we're trying to please everybody because we know where both sides are coming from. So that's what I think with the middle guard, that we just need to learn how to let go of some things, say no to some things, and let those two guards kind of, you know, live things out themselves. Uh, and our lack of, I'm trying to read these things, y'all. As far as the old guard, the resistance to try something new, and their lack of technology understanding, because that is the way that the new kids approach everything. So, sometimes they feel like they don't even have to learn that because they've gotten everything they need to get. But that is a disconnect. As far as respect, what is respect? You know what I'm saying? From guard to guard, it's a different thing. So I think us on each guard should try to understand what respect is from guard to guard. Certain countries looking people in the eye is disrespect, but my father wants me to look him in the eye. So I need to know how to be able to code switch, if you will, and understand that. And then the last thing, um, is just out of touch. What is out of touch? I can be out of touch because I'm not an old guard. I might be out of touch with an old guard. I might be out of touch with a new guard. Everybody's out of touch. We just need to, come together and learn what makes each guard, I think, tick. That's it.
Sybil, I think you hit a huge point right
I
there.
think you said something important. Yeah, go ahead, Tori.
My bad. I get kind of low questions sometimes. But like the biggest takeaway I just had from Cybil Haskins was that um we need to know how to approach each guard because ultimately we teach an art that is subjective and is subjective to the lens through which it's viewed. So if we know the audience, we know the people that we know the audience, we know the people that we're dealing with. I know that when I go to CAU game, I know that there's 3 or 4 different generations sitting in the audience, and so we try to appeal to all of those. But the people that are performing, I have to teach them how to engage those different generations. And the job of the educator is to be able to reach it to some degree all of those people. Um, when I walk into my classroom, I don't think of my classroom as, okay, these 50 students in front of me are going to have to get used to me. And they're gonna run things my way. The fact of the matter is, there's gonna have to be some push and pull between me and the students. I can't reach the students if I'm going 100% millennial on them. I cannot. I have to know what makes them tick. I have to know what helps them to understand. I cannot teach them the same way that I understand. That's just not going to happen. I cannot teach a room full of Generation Alpha, which is where we are now. I can't teach a room full of Generation Alpha and come at them completely like Generation X or completely like a millennial. And so we have all these factors that we're dealing with as educators, but at the end of the day, it's the students that we have to reach, and we're not going to reach them through a millennial lens. Now, that does not mean I'm coming to work wearing skinny jeans with 16 holes up my right thigh. But it does mean that I have to meet them where they are and drag them kicking and screaming to where they should be, while still making sure that they are able to be that they're malleable to uh, words are hard today. Make sure that they're malleable to the people which we serve, which ultimately are the audiences that are listening to us. And I think one of the disconnects is that enough of us don't understand that.
Now there are some who on each level who I think have accomplished the goal of understanding. There's hope, but for the most part, people just don't want to learn something new. But I have witnessed a couple of older directors, middle-aged directors, and new directors that have been able to maximize what would be considered old, middle, and new in their program.
I I don't know. I feel like millennials, kind of everybody's touching on it. We literally are the most adaptable. I think our generation is the most adaptable, and I think that makes us special because we do have the ability to see the value in different perspectives. Just if you think about like our parents, you know, some of our parents are boomers, but some of our parents grew up during civil rights movement. So I think we kind of grew up in a time that we had to roll with the punches because that was changing, and we just kind of learned how to see the value in all things. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think that because we grew up in such an iconic time, we're like millennial. Just think about what that means. It is a changing of a whole century's worth of thinking. And I just think that we may not have all the answers, but I think someone said it earlier today. We kind of got cheated out of our moment. You know, I feel like we got cheated out of our moment to bridge the gap. I feel like we were told by the old guard to wait your turn, and the new guard said we ain't waiting, and they kind of jumped. You know, it's kind of like being in line in elementary school, and I'm dating myself. You know, when you're in line, you got a line leader or whatever, and the teachers used to tell us, wait your turn. And then there's this kid that you in the lunch line, and the kid just jumped all the way to the front. Nobody says anything to them because, you know, we've been taught and trained to kind of just, you know, God's timing, be patient, your time will come. Our time came, and someone jumped in front of the line. I don't know. That's how I feel sometimes. I think about my college band director, Dr. Miles, starting when he was in his 20s. And then they told us, wait, you don't know enough yet. Study to show you thyself approved. When I first started arranging, I was told, go through your theories first. And I appreciate it because my stuff came out so much better. But we also have now the microwave generation that everybody's kind of talking about where they don't wait. they don't have that patience to wait. Instant gratification, Lauren said it. So now they jumped in front of the line, and they are in front of the line, but they don't even know that, and I don't want to say their place, but they don't even know the amount of skill it took to even be in the middle. And that's not saying that I think all of the new guard have no information, but it's not about information. It's about experience. That word experience is the devil now to some. Like, experience, I don't need experience. I got that fire. It's like, yeah, but experience will keep you out of jail. Experience, I think when we're in the middle, we have been smacked on the hand, for doing the wrong thing, not following a procedure or a policy, even if it's new. So we have to learn how to know new policies in the now, so we don't get slapped on the hand, or even worse, removed from the middle it took years to get to the middle. And I think sometimes the new guard kind of look at it like, well, y'all were just sitting on your behinds, so we took the opportunity. And then you start to see them have struggles that you like, you're having some struggles because you don't have experience. Someone didn't pull you to the side and say, hey, brother, sister, you might not want to do that. And we would stray, and sometimes it worked for our benefit, and sometimes it didn't. And a lot of times we found ourselves following some of those rules that we pushed against. That's my opinion. Michael, you had your church finger. I'm going to give that floor back to you.
Yeah, I'm back. I guess, I'm going to leave that one alone. I think that the world is different today. When you look at finances and you tell somebody how to save money and build wealth, it's a little bit different than what our parents had to deal with, or our grandparents, because they could work an industry job, a factory job, and still be able to, have a family home, one, maybe two cars, insurance, and everything off of that one salary, versus today where inflation has just driven everything up. We have electronic currency now. Everything is so different. And it's even different in music education. And I think that there's a lot of pride on both sides. I guess you could say the older generation and the newer generation, there's a lot of pride on both sides. And I know that me and my educational journey, I think that I've learned so much from both educators and performers who are in my community and outside my community. And I have noticed that there's a resentment for music education that is outside of our community. And anything that comes from outside of our community, certain people within our community, we rejected. You see that from, I'm just going to use the term old guard. I'm still trying to learn how to use that. You see that with the old guard, we're saying, well, they got this in their community. They're in the suburbs, and they don't have to deal with what I had to deal with. And all their kids got private lessons, and they're bitter. And all those things are true and valid. But there are also good educators in our community that don't have those things, and they produce top-notch bands, And then you have people from the newer generation where anything that comes from, I guess you could say the PWI side, it's rejected. It's rejected hard. And they talk about educating our own, okay, but at some point you're going to have to, if you're really serious about educating your own, at some point you are going to have to go to the other side of the track for something. You're going to have to go to the other side of the track. If you're talking about getting a doctor's degree in music education, where are you going to go to get one and come back to our community? At some point, you have to go to the other side of the track. And no, everyone on the other side of the track is not for you, but neither is everyone on the other side of the track against you. Some of my best advocates are people from the other side of the track. Dr. Michael Poore, he helped me out so much with my middle school program, because I've taught middle school before, but coming to this job from my last job, I taught high school. And the things that I did in high school didn't necessarily work for middle school kids. And it's been a while since I've been back in middle school. And not only in middle school, but teaching at the caliber that I'm teaching at right now. And he shared his whole entire warm-up folder with me. And that is almost all I use right now. And he's from the other side of the tracks. And you have a lot of people that get into their pride, both young and new, and they don't want to ask for help, and they don't want to admit that they don't know everything, because we don't. And I know like people like to, you like to jab at me that, oh, I come from FAMU. I come from a great FAMU. But I'm going to say this, and I'm talking about me. Just because, I came from FAMU, it doesn't automatically make me a great music educator. It's not automatic. I come from a great program, but I had to roll up my sleeves and I had to work like everybody else. I had to ask questions. I had to go sit in people's band rooms. I had to send emails. I had to make phone calls. I had to go to the conferences. And me, I'm an introvert. So one of the best things that ever happened to me was meeting Jack Eady, because Jack Eady used to come to my house and kidnap me and drag me out the house and make me go hang out with other band directors. And that's how I learned. That's how I learned, by just hanging out with people that were better than me, whether they were from my community or not from my community. And I think that everybody has this wall up that they're trying to prove themselves, and they're trying to reinvent the wheel and try to validate that the way they do things is correct. And that's not always true. In the 14 years that I've been teaching, the way I run my classroom has evolved so much. Some things I kept, some things I changed, some things I go back to depending on what students I have in front of me. But I think that overall, we just kind of have to, and I'm talking about us as Black educators. I'm talking about Black educators. I'm not talking about nobody else. We have to be willing to come to the table with each other. We have to be willing to come to the table with each other, because I know plenty of new guard people that will sit down and listen to an old head. And I know plenty of old heads that'll sit down and they'll pour wisdom into the new guard people and even ask the new guard people for help, but it's those people that put up the walls and the perception that, they got everything and they got all the answers. Those are the people that some people look up to. And I'm not going to say that they're not good examples, but it's not helping who it's meant to help. And that's our students and our community.
Where is the clap sound? Where's the applause sound?
I ain't got none of it. I don't have it because I am actually a guest in this platform. So I don't have so if you get kicked out and stuff, I can't do nothing for you. But we can give a round of applause. Everything ain't got to be virtual. We ain't got to just hit a button. We can actually use our hands. I'm about to sound like church. We could put our hands up and distract the enemy with the sound of our hands. I need an organ. But Michael, oh man, Michael, you hit the nail on the head. One, there are young people who listen. There are young people who listen to people for advice and guidance. I know they are because they send me DMs. They may not call you on a phone, but you get a text message at 7 a.m. That means they care. That means that they're invested. Hey, question today. I'm investing in mouthpieces for myself so I can learn how to play these instruments. Today, not old guard, not middle guard, somebody who's fresh in the game. What kind of mouthpiece do I need to go get so I can help my students? My student my former mentee is a leader in the district I just left. He's an arts leader. He came to my school today. He stood up in the middle of PD about 10 years ago and declared war. He was like, how do you get them to sit down? I will never forget that question. He said, this is all great. We were doing sight reading. He said, this is all great, but how do we get them to sit down? He stopped PD, and everybody loved on that brother and gave him wisdom and tips. I put him in the office. I said, one, you can't completely hijack PD like that. Like you can't. And he was at school today. I always say it to him. It's like, he stood up and did like this. No, because I feel like the Gen Zs have some expressions that are hilarious to me. And he was like, this ain't working. And we helped that brother. He asked for help. I think the problem is in really egos, and I think the egos span generations. Tori?
My bad, y'all. Y'all know I think it's been said with the younger generation, a lot of them have the ego to where, I just got out of college, I know everything, I'm ready to rock, and there's nothing anybody can tell me. I'm going to change the world one F minor chord at a time. But we also have to acknowledge that some of the old guard, and quite honestly, a lot of the middle guard, will gatekeep as a means of self-preservation. There are a ton of band directors in my area who have the keys. They're in the room where everything happens, and they'll keep specific people out because those people are too visible. And I feel like I got a seat at the table, so I shake it every now and again. But gatekeeping from the older generation and even some of the older millennials is a huge issue because we see these programs, we know that they'll crash and burn, but eventually I'm trying to protect my job. I'm trying to make sure that I keep the community that I serve locked on to what I'm doing. So I don't want them to see this program over here. So I'm not going to help this young person over here. I think that's both doing a disservice to not only to the Gen Z band director and their students, but it's doing a disservice to you and your students. I'll be honest and say that a crap ton of what I've learned in the past half decade, I've learned from younger directors. That's one of the ways that I keep in communication, or I say keep things fresh in my classroom. And I'm one of those people where if a younger director asks me a question, I'm going to not only answer his question, but I give him a ton more that goes with that because we still have to pass this stuff down. Gatekeeping it helps nobody. And if you've been in, I love quoting Hamilton. If you've been in a room where stuff happens and you don't allow a younger music educator to at least look through the window, you're doing a disservice. That's my biggest thing there. Is we have to share the information. We can't sit back and complain that the young guard is doing this. We can't complain about crank culture and all that stuff if we're not doing anything to help the directors that are in the thick of it. Now, if we offer our help and they turn us away, then that's one thing. But if we're not even offering, what are we doing as music educators? What's the freaking point at that point? That's all I got.
Can we do another? No, I'm with Tori. When I was an undergrad, I felt like I wasn't around people better than me, and have latched on to Krystal. I've been to her school, and I've latched on to the clarinet teacher there because I'm trying to audition for some fellowships. And the other side of the tracks, he was was he President's Own, Krystal? He was in the President's Own. Yeah. Very good clarinetist. He let me play for him. A couple of, orchestral excerpts. He said, okay, that part seems weird. Let me go to my books. And he got the original parts because I'm playing out of a book of orchestral excerpts, and there's a slur in the Mendelssohn Third Symphony that doesn't belong. He said, this is the actual part. That's how you should play it. And he was giving me advice like, if they give you the excerpts, play what they ask you. I said, they gave me a list. He said, okay, then play from the original parts that the composer wrote. So, I don't understand the gatekeeping when the information is free. You know, I don't like, especially people who gatekeep, people who are bottom of the barrel gatekeep from other bottom of the barrel people, or people who got it from the mud gatekeep from other people who's trying to get out the mud. You know, the whole point of having this information is so you don't have to be in, you know, the next generation doesn't have to be in the mud. I thought that was the whole point of everything, from the old guard to the middle guard, from the middle guard to the new guard. We shouldn't still be in the mud. It seems like we're all still rolling in the mud because we won't get along. Like there is, you know, there's too much of the reinventing of the wheel, too much of, you know, well, I got it, you know, this way. You have to get out the mud and build it from the bottom up. There's too much information out there. We're in the I guess the reason why Krystal's mentee did what he did, because he realized he was in a room full of information. So he stood up and he said something. And you know, that's the way to do it. There's too much information flowing around. We're in the age of technology. We're too informed as a society to keep things away from people. And you know, that's a character. If you hold on to something that's free, you know, that anybody else, or a question that anybody else can answer, then that's a character flaw. And you know, you can move one way, but you move a different way. So I think all the guards can learn from each other. I'm glad Michael, he touched on more of a, not just old guard, new guard, but you know, our community, the Black community, and everybody else, and also among different band styles, different pedagogy styles, also different instruments. You know, you need to talk to people who don't play your instrument. You know, that's a thing. There are people that don't do that. Like, oh, I only do winds, but not percussion, or I only know percussion, but I don't know anything about winds. Or, you know, there's a lot of people that get intimidated by the clarinet. Somebody said, you know, when you put a clarinet together, it looks like putting together a rifle. Like, y'all just have so much. Like, look, it's not as hard as you think it is. You know, just sit down with somebody and learn some methods. And also just learn like the basic techniques of a different instrument, because you're teaching students who play all types of instruments. They don't just play your instrument, right? So, you know, it's good to be in the room where it happens. I really love that song from Hamilton, by the way. It's good to be in the room where it happens, so you can have access to different circles. I think that experience I had with the clarinet teacher at Krystal's high school, and also my own clarinet teacher at Morgan, it allowed me to go into different circles, because I have a certain goal. And they'll ask me like, what's your goal? I tell them my goal, and they'll say, okay, this is what you do. This is who you talk to. This is how you play your clarinet. Here are the types of mouthpieces you need. What are you playing on? What does your clarinet setup look like? You know, that's how you get to different. I know I'm not speaking on education. I'm speaking on like performance aspect, but it's still the same thing, you know, trying to get into different circles so you'll have more knowledge and you'll get more experience.
There's a question that came in the chat before you go, Michael. That was about, the question was, is it gatekeeping or some people's way of protecting their jobs?
Yes. People gatekeep in order to keep their jobs. That's just as easy.
That's the easy answer.
That's actually what I was going to say.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. When I've met quite a few gatekeepers in my time in college and even in my career. And one thing I've noticed about them is that, from my perception, this is just me, they're either narcissistic or they're insecure. And the ones that are narcissistic tend to not be very successful. The ones who are insecure, they tend to be successful, but they always live in fear that somebody can come and take their job. You know, they're always in fear. They're always in fear of that. So they play the game like they're trying to stay one step ahead of them. I'm a composer and a arranger. And when I really started getting good at arranging, I noticed that some people stopped giving me advice on my arranging. Some people stopped giving me advice on. I was like, hey, what can I do to make this better? Oh, it's good. And then the next time I called them, they didn't even answer the phone. And it took some time to kind of realize what that was, but I knew what it was in the beginning, but it just took a minute for it to set in. A lot of people who gatekeep, because they're in a position that they know at some point that they have to give up. Mallory Thompson is the conducting professor at Northwestern University. If you know anything about Northwestern University, they are a conservatory style school of music. And they have one of the top school of musics in the country, especially when it comes to performance. And we had a discussion in a conducting cohort about collegiate level jobs. And first off, there aren't that many jobs out there. The field is very saturated. Is very saturated. And I think all of us can probably name maybe 5 high school directors on one, name more directors than we have fingers to count who would be great collegiate directors, but they don't move to that level for several reasons. And it could be family, it could be logistics, it could be politics, it could be money, because they may make more money being on the secondary level than on the collegiate level. And that's also another issue as well. But she talked about how she has seen and produced good conductors and band directors, and they take these jobs out at the small university out in the middle of nowhere, and they're kind of stuck. And they're really good. They're good enough to be in front of top level groups, but then they get this job because there's not very many jobs out there. They have to take it out in the middle of nowhere, and they kind of get stuck there. And they should be in front of a better group, you know. So a lot of these, you know, gatekeepers, you know, they don't want anybody taking their jobs, you know, and especially in our profession, it's not uncommon for somebody to basically die in the job. You know, I'm talking work all the way up until they can barely make it up the stairs, you know, and that's really common, you know. So, you know, I don't think gatekeeping is something that's going to necessarily go away. However, you know, I do think that it is counterproductive to what we do as a culture, because, you know, we're educators, and I've always been taught by great teachers that me as a teacher, I'm my most important student. I'm my most important student. I always have to teach me, because if I'm not getting better, then my students aren't getting better. And when you gatekeep, you stifle that for educators. You stifle that for people who want to know more, who want to grow, and they're not growing. And by them not growing, their students aren't growing. And then by our students not growing, our institutions aren't growing. So, you know, I think that maybe perhaps one day we need to kind of address that as a culture. And I also think that gatekeeping doesn't just happen at the top, it also happens at the bottom too.
I don't think it's necessarily that it's always trying to protect your job as much as it's trying to protect your legacy and your relevance. I don't think, some people don't care who comes in the band room, they just want to be remembered. So I think playing devil's advocate, part of that could be taking place. But music appreciates as we get older. Athletes get, torn ligaments, and they start, falling apart, and they can't continue. So eventually I will be an old guard, and I will be one of those who is gonna want to stay in it until, because that's what keeps you alive. So it's a fine line between it's time for me to shine versus I am still capable mentally, so I'm going to keep my job. And there are other jobs out here. So I'm just playing devil's advocate on that.
But I think that's important, Cybil, because if you, sometimes I'm torn in whether I need to be an administrator or a band director. Because as a band director in modern day society, with all of the education initiatives that happen, I think our wear and tear is greater. I think the wear and tear of the old guard, that's not saying they didn't have problems. They had a lot of problems. But I think the lack of support from the family and community units that used to be the village, I think sometimes we don't want to be in this forever because it'll kill you. And I'm not saying that to be, facetious or anything. We literally had an administrator. We had an emergency meeting today at 3:30 about a 51-year-old teacher who died. I think their children, they have family members that are on staff, and they have I think one of their child is a student. People are dying in these education positions, and they're not even making it to 60. They're having heart attacks. This new BS that we deal with, you can't tell me that any generation has ever had to deal with kids potentially wanting to kill everybody in the room just because someone talked about their shoes. When I first started teaching, Cybil, I used to be like, I'm going to do this forever. That was all I wanted to do from the moment that they put Peter and the Wolf on the film strip in kindergarten. I said, who runs all the orchestra? Okay, so the instruments are cool. Who runs all this? And my teacher told me, and I was sold. I said, that's what I would like to do. But then we get into it, and we're fighting parents, administrators, band heads, social media, expectations that our band that just started playing 2 weeks ago should be playing grade 5 music. People talking about your band slaw, and your kids can't even stay after school.
I can't believe we're fighting band heads. But
we are. We got people who ain't set foot in a classroom in 20 damn years. Quick to talk about what's wrong with what we're doing. I'm like, you don't even know. We can't keep kids after school until it's right. You'll be written up in the morning. You'll be in the principal's office. I've spent enough time in the principal's office with my job at state that said, if it's wrong at 5 o'clock, we have to address it tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And we can only do 3 to 5 because there's coach class. They have occupational therapists that interrupt. These people don't know. They just know that they want to see good bands like how they grew up. And the young guard, they don't know sometimes because they don't know all the policies that have to happen. They just know that their band director, well, we ain't doing no band battles. My band director soft. They don't want us to battle. Don't know they can't get a permission slip approved from an administrator. They don't know all these things. And so that wear and tear, I'm sorry. I used to think I could do this for a long time. I had to take a step back. And I had to look at my son is growing up without his mother. If people want to know, I'm going to say it today. My son can't stay after school and do things he want to do. My son is the last one getting picked up. My son is getting picked up late. My son, I'm that parent now that I kind of look side eyes at for not getting that kid from band practice on time. And I had to say, which one is more important? We forget that most cases, millennials are the parents of the school age children. We're the ones with the kids if you have kids. And if we don't have kids, we're the ones at that midlife point where we're trying to figure out what we want to do with the rest of life, whether we want to go back and get that doctorate, whether we want to go back in school. So all of that's happening. So when we talk about, standing in that gap, People have been telling us millennials to stand in the gap, but we've been standing in some shit. I'm going to say it unedited, unfiltered. We have been standing in some shit for 20 years that nobody has experienced. We have gone through Y2K, No Child Left Behind, Common Core standards, school shootings. You think that this is not mentally healthy to sit in this environment without an expectation to do something that's going to bring you more joy. It's just, to me, I'm not speaking for anybody else on this panel, but to me, there's a lot that has to change for me to say that I'm going to do another 17 years. Because in my district, they moved up the retirement age. You have to be 60 years old, 60 years old, or 33 years of service, which pretty much puts you still at 60 if you started out school. So that means when I retire, I might have 10, 15 years left of my good life. And I think millennials are a little smarter where we value the time and the now a lot more than waiting for our glory in heaven. That's just me. I don't know.
Well, I think also millennials are taught, or rather the newer generation, and I won't say millennials or anybody else, but the younger generation, they're taught to hop from job to job to make as much money as possible. Whereas a lot of the older folks, and I was raised by older folks, so I guess I fall into that category. We're taught to work a job and work it hard until we get promoted and get to where we need to be and retire. Education definitely changed. And I think that everybody on this line who is a teacher, I think we've all had that day where we sat in our office and we thought about, it's not too late for me to go back to school. I could be a doctor. I could be a lawyer. I could be making way more money, getting way more respect, and not be as stressed. God, I think God knows exactly what he's doing. Because on my way to the Celebration Bowl, I bumped into this teacher, and I was having that talk with somebody. I was like, man, like I'm about ready. I'm about ready to get out. And as I was getting off the martyr rail, we were walking the same direction. She started talking to me. She was just like, yeah, I'm a teacher too, And I was overhearing your conversation, and she said something that really stuck with me. And she told me that what keeps her going as a teacher is being a servant. And I was reminded of something one of my pastors said. He talked about servant leadership. And when you operate in servant leadership and servitude, you have to take your ego out of things. And a lot of times our egos, especially band directors, man, we have egos, and our egos are very fragile. They are, band directors have very fragile egos, but when you take your ego out of what's happening, it's a lot easier to see the students and what they need. And that's why we're there. That's why we do this. We don't do this for the money. You know what I'm saying? We don't do this for the fame. We do this for the students, and we display our students. And even us as band directors, we all guilty of it. We all guilty of it. We program music that's too hard for our group because we want to look good on stage. We want to be like, oh, I did this level of literature. Yeah, I look, I pulled my middle school students back from a 3 to a 2 because I realized that it's going to stress me out. It's going to stress them out. They're going to get stressed because I'm stressed. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. These kids haven't even played a 2-piece yet. They're capable of playing a 3, but why make them do that when they've never even played a 2 yet? Wasn't worth it. Wasn't worth it. And a lot of what we've been doing in the classroom has been really successful. And the kids it's starting to click to them what it is that we're doing, because it really doesn't matter what grade level you play. It matters if you're making music, and a lot of times good band directors, bad band directors, we get caught up in our egos. We get caught up in so many other things that we forget what's right in front of us. And that's our students, So when it comes to longevity in this profession, you know, if we're going to do this, you know, we have to find a way to cope with what's in front of us. And I think this morning I had a really good rehearsal with my clarinets. And I just kind of had a minute to just kind of step outside of myself. And I had to remind myself, okay, don't be you today. Be an actor. Don't be you today. This ain't your band. Work with them like you're working with someone else's band. You know how you get when you work with somebody else's band. Like, all right, everybody, we're gonna do this, and you're all enthusiastic, and then you take your check and go out, walk right out the door, and the kids learn something and they feel good. And sometimes you got to walk into your room and you got to do that for your kids, not because they're your kids, but because you got to give them that same feeling that you gave those kids that aren't your kids. You got to make them feel like they learned something, you know, and not just get on them all the time for how bad it sounds or the note that they missed or because they didn't do this, that, and the other. You know, we know how we do with our kids, you know, but just going back to the topic of the new guard, old guard versus thing, I think that there's a lot of ego on both sides.
Ego is something that stands the test of time. I don't care if you're old or young, an ego can make the best things turn into crap. So I have a questions and they're kind of tiered. Michael, man, I knew we was gonna have a part 2. Man, why y'all trying to make me have a part 3 on this? We're not gonna have a part 3. We're gonna get through the questions. I hope maybe. All right, we're gonna get through the questions. I have to move it to this question because I've heard this question a lot from, I want to say, kind of the new guard. And I'm putting the question, isn't going in the chat, but at least I think it's going in the chat. Has the old guard prevented growth in the modern day band program with all of the things that we have discussed?
I mean, I think we have to start by defining growth. Because if growth is being at Ray Ray's Chicken and Barbecue Battle of the Bands that week and going to every other Battle of the Bands that happens, then you know there may be one answer. But if we're talking about development of the whole student and our students being actually able to perform regardless of the idiom that you choose to perform in, then the answer may change there. I think that we've answered that question a couple of different ways as far as our conversations tonight, because we know ego is one of the major things that's getting in the way with that. I think that growth is being prevented by. I personally think that growth is being prevented on both sides of the spectrum. I think that there's a lot that both sides have to offer, and there's a lot that both sides are doing that gets in the way of growth. The drumline factor was brought up earlier, and I think the benefits of that particular movie far outweigh the negatives because now everything that we do is visible. The hard work that we put into the profession is visible, and not only is it visible, but it's lauded and it's appreciated a lot more than it used to be. I think that we have hit a space of stagnation as far as programs go, because the growth is now horizontal and not necessarily vertical. So we're not changing the game. We're not adding to the game so much as we are getting bigger, if that makes any sense. I think that there are more people involved. There are far more people involved, but we're not necessarily pushing the envelope, so to speak.
I have to agree, Tori, that I think we're not pushing the envelope. Anybody want to respond to what Professor Goodson said? Because, you know, I'm going to put professor in front of everybody's name at this point. Because y'all all scholars to me. The way y'all preaching this good word today.
Yeah. I'd like to respond, and just gonna let you know right now. Had to go get my gloves. These fighting words. I don't want to say that the old guard had prevented growth in the modern band program. I think that there is some on both sides, but I'm just going to talk about the preparation that takes place in music education programs. I think that there are some that do a really good job, and then some that's a bit more lacking. I think that some programs don't prepare music educators to be able to build a complete program or a comprehensive program. And they have the idea and philosophy that the marching band is the main it of the program, where it's just that the marching band is simply the face of the program. It's the most visible thing in the program. I mean, people are going to see it every Friday night of the football season. They're going to see it at parades, even competition. But some people make marching band the main it instead of building their concert bands, their beginning bands, their wind ensemble, their jazz ensembles, their small ensembles, their solos. You know, there are programs out there where students go through and they don't even get an opportunity to audition for All-State or District Honor Band because they spend so much time doing that. And that's not every single programs, but they're out there. And I think not only does it limit our scholars, but it just really insults their intellect. You know, we insult, and don't get me wrong, classical music is somewhat foreign in our community because we just don't listen to it like that. But we insult the intellect of our students by not giving them an opportunity to learn it. And I'm not saying that, you know, we need to do that every single day, but it needs to be a regular part of their musical diet. And I use the word diet because if you gave your child chocolate cake and candy every single day and everything that they want and love, then what's that child's health going to be like? Not very good, you know. And I think that everything within reasonability, and I think that mostly everybody here has had a good parent or is a good parent, and they understand that. And we need to look at our programs that way. But I think that some music education programs in our community, mainly HBCUs, they don't give music educators and young directors the opportunities that they need to grow, such as bringing in clinicians while they're in undergrad, bringing in guest conductors, bringing in guest speakers. You know, when I was an undergrad, Dr. Shipman allowed one of the conducting students, one of the conducting PhD students, to come in and conduct the wind ensemble. And he was really good. He was nothing like what we were used to. And I remember he did this one gesture, and I'm going to do my best to try to imitate it. He did this on the podium, just like that. And we were just like, what? And he did it again, but it got the musical effect that he was looking for. And he was a guest. And I remember when they brought in the Air Force Band to perform in Lee Hall Auditorium, and they would do stuff like that. Maybe not every single month or semester, but periodically they would do that. So I felt like I got a really good experience, but a lot of people don't get that experience. Attending professional conferences, you know, they made it a point to make sure that the music majors were a part of, which is now it was MENC back in the day, but I think it's now CM. I'm gonna mess it up. You know what I mean? The national organization. And they took us to the Florida Music Educators Conference every single year. And when I left, they started going to Midwest. I wish they did that when I was an undergrad, but they started doing it once I graduated. A lot of programs don't do a good job of training their replacements. And what I mean by that is preparing music educators who are going to leave and then go to grad school, because you have a lot of people who are good enough, and I mean just naturally talented enough to teach on a collegiate level, but they haven't been prepared to get enrolled into a graduate program. and that's lacking. That's lacking. There's a program that's in my home state that a lot of people complain about, that, oh, we've never had a band director that's an alumni of the program. And I look at the music education program at that place. So if you know what I'm talking about and you're from there, please don't get mad at me. I'm just spitting facts here. If you look at their music education program, their music education program is only preparing students to get out and become band directors to feed their program. They're not producing music professionals to go to school and get graduate degrees in music education or performance or theory or any of those things. They're just training them to hurry up and get out of school, make as many kids as you can, and then send them here. And I think that is wrong. I think that, what's the word I'm looking for? It's carnivorous in nature, because it's cannibalistic. We tend to eat ourselves, and it doesn't really facilitate growth. So I think that in that regard, and I'm not talking about, every single old guard member that's out there, but I think in that regard, the leaders in our community, in our profession, in our community, in that regards, some of our leaders have failed the graduates that are coming out of these programs. Not every single program, and I won't even say most programs, but it's happening in a lot of our programs more than what it needs to.
Man, Michael, that right there is the fact that, what are we really preparing them to do? Are we preparing them to create the next generation or the next moments in the bands we came from? I think that some of us, I think true music educators, not band directors. Some band directors are music educators, but not all band directors are music educators. Some music educators are not actually really good band directors, but because they're good music educators, the prophecy can still be fulfilled, if that makes sense. It may not benefit their program because they may not ever have that band that gets superior ratings, but they send kids out who can play their instrument upside down, who knows their skills, who's prepared. And then in college, we hope, if you're that band director, we hope that kid has a band director that's going to prepare them for anything they may want to involve themselves with in the professional world. If you want to be a singer, do that. If you want to make beats in a lab, do that. If you want to be a composer, do that. If you want to be a music educator. And I think sometimes at our HBCU, some of us kind of got a different handle on it than others. That's just a fact. And we can say the same thing about PWIs, but I'm only going to talk about where I spent most of my time. So please, people, if you listening, this is not me bashing HBCUs, because I stand 10 toes down that my education from an HBCU stands against any PWI, in a lot of cases, inexperience on my horn and otherwise. But I think sometimes we are myopic in our vision with what we want the outcome of these band students to be. If they're a music educator, what if they are not going to be the best band director, but they will be the person that runs music technology and creates the next Robert Glasper, that creates the next Neptunes, that creates that next genius in a studio? I think we are very narrow-minded sometimes with what we see our own accomplishing, because society has kind of forced us into boxes, especially if you're black. It's Black History Month, my earrings. So I'm going to say it. We kind of have become masters in the areas that we felt like we were allowed to be. And sometimes we haven't branched out into those other areas where we can really shine. And we have students who can shine in other ways outside of a marching band narrative, outside of a concert band narrative. I don't think we truly understand our job as music educators on any guard level. That's just me being honest. I don't think that the old guard I don't think they realized they were training their replacements. I think once they finally got through it, and a lot of them got it through the mud and discrimination and racism and, civil unrest, that when they finally got at the top, they just didn't want to come down. I understand that. They just didn't want to come down because it took so long to get there. And that's where Dr. Wooten said there are some old guards who sometimes are a hindrance as they try to stay relevant. We all want to be relevant, but we also know when to step aside a little. And I think that step aside where we might have trained our replacement, but we're still standing on their toes in the dance. They can't move from under us because we still trying to keep them right here instead of let them go. Like a baby bird, they got to go out the nest and flap their wings and fly. And you got to trust that you've given them enough practicum to fly. But sometimes I feel like they just don't want to let the bird go because we all know that, to be honest, it's like if I stop doing this, I'm going to die. I truly feel like some people in the old guard feel like if I stop being involved in this thing that I've known all my life, my purpose will cease to exist and I will die. I don't think they see themselves as the ones who need to be the mentors, the clinicians, the people to support new guard band directors through some of these things, or even, the middle guard. I think they sometimes just feel like if I stop, I'm gonna die. I think the new guard sometimes feel like nobody listens to them because they feel like they ain't, like we used to say to students in college, you don't have enough credits yet. Y'all remember they used to say, you don't have no credits yet. You're not really a student here. And I think because they have been raised to be more vocal about things that bother them, they've been trained to be more resistant and not necessarily take word as bond. I think millennials, we were trained to take word as bond. Your elder said it, it is gold. And then as we got older, sometimes we're like, some things my band director did wasn't all that great. And we change accordingly. But I think the problem with us millennials sometimes is that nobody let us drive the car. Nobody, we got our learner's permit, but it stays in our wallet and we don't really know what we're capable of. I know that's me. I don't really, and I can say this honestly, I don't really know what I am capable of because I feel like I've never been given the keys to try to see what my limit is. And so we just feel like we just keep going back to school. We go to PDs, we get these nuggets, but I think we still stuck at the computer taking the drivers, getting learner's permit, but I don't think we've ever known what it is like to drive the car alone. Anybody want to kind of chime in? Whew.
Well, I feel like everything you said is absolutely valid. But I'm also reminded of a conversation that I had with my chorus director, one of my colleagues. And I walked in her classroom and I looked her right in the face. I said, we're the adults now. Like, who authorized this? Who authorized this? Like, we're the adults. They're letting us do this thing. Like, so in a very large sense, you're absolutely right. But in another sense, hey, we are the face and the leaders of music education right now. We are the driving force. We out here in these streets. We out here in these trenches, like real time. And we're doing it. And we're in charge of this. Thought used to terrify me like my first 2, 3, 4 years of teaching. We're actually in charge of someone's music education. Like, we're responsible for that. That was terrifying for me. That was absolutely terrifying. But I think the thing about it now is that we can create our own opportunities now. We can create our own opportunities. And I think now more than ever, we can create our very own space. We have the internet and social media and everything, all these other different avenues. We have things like teachers pay teachers. You can go to J.W. Pepper and self-publish now. Compositions and arrangements. You can write books now. And nobody has to know who you are. Only thing it takes is just a small group of people just to agree with what you're saying. And they spread the word to other people. We can create our own spaces now. And I think that that's a really, really powerful thing. So, not to take away from what you're saying, because I do agree with what you're saying. But on the flip side of that coin, we can create our own spaces now.
I also think,
and I think we're realizing it.
I have a delay, so that's my bad. Can y'all hear me? Okay. I was saying I don't think it's necessarily fair to pose a question as if is the old guard was preventing so and so to happen, because everybody had their hand in destruction, if you will. I know the old guard, in my opinion, was more about comprehensive programs. They were more about exposing the students to various genres of music, different types of ensembles, just that exposure. We kind of gotten away from that now. I know now we push. We don't push. We slap on the wrist. We make exceptions for everybody. And that's definitely not an old guard mentality, but that's one that I wish would stick, because it's this thing, and like Mike said, I'm just speaking from my own experience. Y'all can email me if you have any comments, but I just feel like African Americans treat other African Americans like babies. Because I'm black and you black, I'm gonna make sure that I slip you in through here. Because I'm black and you're black, I'm gonna slap you on the wrist. Because I'm black and you're black, then hey, take this test. I'm gonna give you a B, even if you fail it. That is not it. I don't care what anybody says. That is not nurturing. People have the wrong idea of what nurturing is. And nurturing is kicking at what. So, in my opinion, that aspect is a prevention, in addition to, I guess, maybe old guards not wanting to accept, new ways or things of that nature. And the African American community is a community that is going to figure it out anyway. So as far as, having people who come before you to help and people who come after you to help, if they weren't there and you really wanted it, you'll get it anyway.
I like what you said about that babying. And I'm going to tag on to that because I agree so much with it. I feel like another way we baby is we pull on our friends in positions when they aren't the best fit for that position. And it's a double-edged sword to me because it's like we should be pulling each other up. But like if something come across my email and it says, I'm just going to throw out conducting. I pass that to a certain friend of mine who's at a school for the arts who does that, who's skilled in that. I don't want to gatekeep that because, they contacted me because they remember my blonde hair. That person is the one. And if you don't know them, I'm going to help you. But what I think in the band culture, we're seeing a lot of, let me pull so-and-so in because I know them. And I'm like, but do you know what they can do? Do they know how to deal with this demographic, this culture of student? Do they know how to teach in this environment, or you just know their name? or they're popular, and then we see scandal after scandal, sometimes based off of someone knew somebody, but you also knew they had messed with them, and you pulled them in anyway. And I think we have misread the prophecy when it comes to pulling in people, pulling each other up. I think we thought that was without vetting, without studying to show thyself approved. I think we thought it meant, I know so-and-so, so I'm going to open the door for them. Some people don't deserve to be in the door yet. You know, there's a season for everything, right? You know, Bible, there's seasons. And sometimes it's not their season, and you let them in too early, and they burn the whole house down, and then you sitting there holding the ashes. So I agree with you, Cybil, wholeheartedly. Sometimes we have some people that we bring in, and I have to be careful, even with myself. Me and Lauren had this situation, and Lauren's empathy came out first, and I didn't have time to tell, Lauren. It was just kind of in the moment. I was like, I was like, and she was being apologetic, and she was really looking out for one of her own. And then she found out why that person was dealing with the situation they was dealing with. And I think we're not transparent. We're not always transparent with ourselves, with someone's ability, or transparent with the people that we're trying to bring in. I do like the fact that the old guard used to tell us not yet. Some of those not yet saved my career. Some of those not yets were like, there's something better. Don't jump at every opportunity. This ain't the one. And I think new guard sometimes just kind of jump into the fire, and sometimes if they're blessed, they have somebody say not yet, but sometimes they're just like, but I want it now, that instant gratification. And then they get burned, and we're like, I told you were gonna get burnt. And they're like, that by then they're almost taken out by it. So I agree with Cybil wholeheartedly. Professor Cybil Haskins, I agree with you that sometimes it's just not the time, and we baby each other, and we don't say, nah, this ain't the time. Like I was told with my first arrangements in college, go take theory. Dr. Melvin Miles told me in September, when I first put something on his desk, tell me what your grade is in theory after midterms. And I came back in midterms. He said, tell me what your grade is in ear training. And then I came back at the end of the semester. And then that arrangement that had been sitting on his desk for now 3 and 4 months, he said, okay, now we can read it. We'll try it. Because he was saying, there's some stuff you don't know yet, and you don't know it, but go find out. He didn't say we weren't going to ever play an arrangement of mine. I'm blessed, and I'm thankful that that's not what he said, because it might have crushed me. But he did say, go tell me what that grade looked like when you done with those theory classes, or you done with ear training. And I see that first transcript. And I know that you know key signatures, and I know that you know chord structure, and I know you know basic 4-part writing. And then we'll try it. But I also watch people crash and burn that he said yes to, and I got a little bitter sometimes, young and hothead. I was mad. I was like, you let so-and-so and so-and-so get up there. So-and-so got up there, and none of his parts were transposed. I was like, woo. But then I had learned enough information to know why I was going wrong. And that prevented me from putting out a product that was not to my best capabilities. That's all I'm going to say. I yield the floor back to the panel. Don't nobody want to go?
Well, is it about the old guard preventing The new guard. Um, I say yes and no. I say more no than yes. The only thing they're not doing is moving from they're not retiring. They're either retiring or dying in their positions. I feel like sometimes the new guard doesn't go to the old guard, for advice. It's beneficial to sit in somebody's office and have a conversation with them, and just a conversation. It doesn't have to be, okay, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. No, having a conversation with a lot of these old guard, a lot of them are legends. You sit and you learn their life experiences. Getting to know them on a personal, more intimate level. It doesn't. That in itself is an education, and we don't do that anymore. I will say that the old guard does need, well, we've said this a lot in the conversation tonight. The old guard they need to learn the new generation. They need to talk to them as well to get a perspective of where they're coming from. But yeah, I think we should sit in their office more. Sit in the old guard's office more, or call them, email them, even visit them, and just have a conversation with them. That's all I really have to say about it.
I agree with that. I know everybody is probably like, why is she all about the old guard? It's not like that. It's just that they are a wealth of like so much knowledge, and to have that die with them would be so disappointing for me. Yes, I am, I guess, a new middle guard or whatever like that, but we all choose the bits and pieces that we want to take from everybody anyway in life. We are a combination of everything, and their piece is absolutely important. When they leave, it's going to be lost because a lot of those techniques and methods, are on paper. All I'm saying is it would be a shame if we don't sit down, like Lauren said, with them, because you talking about starting something from scratch and reinventing the wheel. Well, that's what we'll be doing. It's a lot of things that they implemented that need to continue. With the new guard, they don't have anybody to be the middle to, so they don't know right now. But when they become the middle, they'll understand where we're coming from in their defense with that.
Time teaches all, right? You know what? If you're a musician, even a musician, you don't even have to be a music educator. You just have to have been on your horn long enough to see that. I remember in college being told that my sound was so bright and that I need to work on my tone not being bright. And I didn't never really work on it in college. I'm gonna be honest, because I can play technical and I relied on that. But then when I started to have a different palette of music, I realized that clarinet had such a beautiful timbre and color, and I said, I play an instrument with this color and I'm not it. And so my focus changed from so much of being able to move to how I approach notes. That came with time. And tone took time to develop. My technique, sometimes I felt like that was something I could develop really quickly because that's repetition. But tone, there's so many variables to it. And it wasn't until I want to say I was in my mid-30s before I liked my tone and people liked my tone. But if you had told me that when I was in my 20s, I was like, oh, all right, whatever. And I still sound like a screaming banshee all the time. And I'm saying that to say, I think the new guard, and I know like everybody's tripping up over these words. These are just words. This is what I see described in social media. Like I see a lot of people say, man, I just want the old guard to just sit down and die. I literally have seen commentary like that. Just go somewhere and die. I know, Cybil, I try to be tuned in to see what's being said on all perspectives. So a lot of these questions, these not necessarily my questions. These are the questions I see people say or comments that they say. You know, the old guard is in this. The middle guard, they just suck and they just mad that we beat them to it. That's sometimes I see the new guard have comments like that. I see the middle guard saying that don't nobody know what they're doing because nobody know what we dealing with in the now. And these are just terms that I've heard and seen. But at the end of the day, to me, time is the big equalizer. What I used to say I wouldn't do as a band director, the test of time had me running the same warm-up every day because it produced a result that I wasn't getting just rushing, throwing the Bruno Mars on that stand and being like, this is what you're going to learn because it's engaging. Yeah, but sometimes engaging is like candy, Michael said. Yeah, but you're going to have diabetes. Yeah, you were engaged and hyped up, but now your blood sugar through the roof and you got high blood pressure. But these vitamins will stand the test of the time because your body is going to, or your musical body is going to last longer this way. But you couldn't have told me that when I was 20. You couldn't have told me that when I was 25. I joined a community band that was the antithesis of what I was learning in college. Literally. So I'm not gonna no longer shame the crank culture because I felt there was a point of time where I was like, reason nobody know what we is because we not doing what everybody else doing. And then I got into the classroom and I realized what was really important to me. And I started to kind of align myself, or saw I was more aligned with the old guard than I thought. And so the test of time, I think for our younger brothers and sisters in this, I don't think the conversation will be the same in 10 years. Because then they'll become the middle guard. And like we all will, the old guard will eventually go meet whoever you believe in. And then there'll be a new guard telling them what they do is stupid. It always moves that way. That's my opinion. There's a final question. Because I think this is... Are there some things that we can... Michael, go ahead.
No, I wanted to add to what you were saying, if that's okay. You also got to remember who's talking. Because everybody who's talking is not always worth listening to. I used to hear somebody say all the time, you can always tell a tree by its fruit. And everybody don't produce good fruit. I agree with you 100%, because if anybody's ever been in the room with Dr. Julian E. White, they know that he can talk. And when I was in the band, I just used to want to get to the music. Like, can you please just stop telling these stories? Let us get to the music. And now that I'm older, I'm just like, shut up. Doc about to say something. He about to say something. Because I realized, man, Doc's stories were so good and it was so filled with wealth. But I also realized that, man, Doc's getting old. He ain't gonna be with us that much longer. Man, we need to soak up every moment we have with him right now while he's here. And like you say, time. But not everybody comes to that place in time. Most people do, but not everybody. Some people stay in the same place. I wanted to say something earlier about, the crank culture. And this is a perspective that I have, and I think some other people may have this perspective as well too. The first time I heard the word crank was during my student teaching in 2006 at Pebblebrook High School. And I had never heard the word crank before. And when you think about the word crank, you think about, something being turned and churned and getting a cranking sound. And that's why they call it cranking. And, one of the most important things that I learned in college is that your most important asset is your tone quality. That's your most important asset. You can play the wrong note in a piece of music. As long as you do it with good tone, most people won't know it. They'll think it's intentional if you just play with good tone. And Cranking ignores that. You know, my trumpet professor was a jazz musician, but he trained me classically. And I used to always consider the type of sound that I wanted out of my horn, not a loud sound, but a big sound, a fat sound, or rather a resonant sound. And that's what I was always taught as a brass player, to play with resonance, because resonance is going to do the work for you, not just putting a whole bunch of air in the instrument. Because as a brass player, I can't stand it when people play on small mouthpieces, and as a trumpet player, you should have a fat, round, broad, big sound, and not a sound that sounds like a kazoo. And I hate trumpet players that play like that, because they're playing on a mouthpiece that's just way too small for them. They're trying to play on a lead mouthpiece, and they're not really a lead player. And cranking lends itself to that. Not necessarily the culture, but just that word, just as a brass player. Because when I think of a brass sound, man, I'm thinking of the orchestra. Because when you look at an orchestra, there's only 3 trumpet players back there. There's only 3 of them, but they got to fill up that whole entire auditorium. That whole entire auditorium. They got to fill it up. How do they do that? Through resonance. Through resonance. And a lot of people want to try to imitate that big sound, but they do it by taking the instrument to the very edge of its tone. And it doesn't get the same type of quality or timbre or resonance that the instrument is capable of. And people who are real musicians, they know that. They know that if you're a real musician, you know that. Because as a real musician, when I first got to college, man, I love marching band. Want to do it every day. The closer I got to senior year, I'll be like, yo, can I please put this down? Can I please go practice for my senior recital? Like, I don't want to do this every single day. Like, let me please go work on the Hindemith trumpet sonata. Let me please go work on these excerpts, these trumpet excerpts. Please let me go work on them. Because at that time, that became more valuable to me than trying to play for maximum sound on the band drill field, you know. And the cranking culture kind of leans more to that, which is away from fundamental brass playing, because it really not really includes the woodwinds in that. It's really all about the brasses, that cranking sound, you know. So I don't want to turn this into a, bashing the crank culture type of thing, but yeah. I wanted to just kind of backtrack to that.
I wonder,
Michael,
people gonna be deaf.
listen, you can't tell them nothing until they get to the middle, and then the body wear and tear or the ears wear and tear. They go to the doctor and they're like, you have 10% hearing loss, and that's when it will matter. I hate to say it, but we are a reactive society, and this has nothing to do so much with our race. We're reactive, Cybil. So some of this stuff is just not, some things that we agree with now is not going to be disagreeable until it hurts us. And I'm not saying crank it hurt. I'm just saying in general, until it hurts us, until we see, oh, we got kids that can't really get through the full facility of their instrument, or somebody feels squirrely and they want to pull out a Eric Whitaker, and they find out how out of tune that group is, or they find out how their kids can't sustain. And I'm not preaching from the diadem. I'm preaching from the middle, where I've been like, oh, let me try this. And I was like, oh, shit, my kids can't hold out a damn note. And that's when we say, oh, okay, maybe what so-and-so said was right. But sometimes we have to just allow people to go through that process, like some of our old guard band directors did with us. Sometimes you just have to, there's a phrase, F around and find out. Sometimes that is what has to happen. You got to mess around and find out. And then you like, oh, shoot, my band director was right. So we can't go into the wee hours of the night. I think there's some things that we probably can agree with, and I think that's a good closing question. Are there some things that, no matter what generation you come from, because when we say the guard word, we're really talking about generations, some things are what they are. They're just standard. They work. They stand the test of time. Whether social media, whether all of a sudden we can just download the internet and be walking around and it just instantly puts itself in the front of our face in real time. We used to joke when I was in college, virtual band battles. We used to joke about this, and we used to do this from our dorm and play band clips in dorm at the like peak range of like the stereos that we were really crap. And then it started to be a thing like 20 years later. Are there some things that we can all agree with? One thing, don't have to elaborate, that you think is just standard. And these will be our closing remarks.
Well, let me start. First of all, I was one of those people that did the virtual band battles on the 5th quarter, and I would steal clips from the internet and go back and forth with somebody. So yes, you weren't the only one. I'm saying that now because it's so funny, but it's so lame at the same time. So yes, I was one of those people in high school. Secondly, what will stand the test of time? Fundamentals, basic methods, stuff like long tones, and learning also how to be technical on your instrument. And I said that because, Krystal teased me about being more of a technical clarinet player than a lyrical one. But I also mentioned the long tones because it helps you become more lyrical. As far as the topic for tonight, I guess I'm going to piggyback off of what Michael said. I hate that word. I'm going to agree with what Michael said. You can't take constructive criticism from people who haven't constructed anything. And if you want to see how successful a person is, just look at the fruit. You can't trust a plant that doesn't bear fruit. So I would say whatever methods a person that produces has, that stands the test of time. But yeah, I said what stands the test of time is fundamentals and all of your basics. Because you can't go from zero. You can't go from ground zero. You can't go to 100 without skipping all the numbers in the middle. So patience and practice, and also consistency. Consistency is another thing that stands the test of time.
Consistency, fundamentals. Michael?
I would probably say just one of my biggest, just kind of stepping away from the musical aspect, is the camaraderie between programs. And I guess the best way that I can describe it is that some people, when it comes to band programs, it's almost a gang mentality, where instead of seeing a camaraderie with the person from across the field or in another band program, it's a lot of contention. It's the urge to compete, and in a sense, I guess you could say, bang on your chest, when you see another band. I see a lot of people, especially within our community, we're our own worst enemies sometimes. We'll say the worst things about each other and then call it love. We'll say the worst things about each other and then call it love. Like, oh, it's all love. Well, where's the love if that's the case? Where is it? I'm a brother of KK Psi, and we were always taught that we should be fostering a good relationship between college bands. And no matter where we go, whether we're playing another HBCU or PWI or whoever, there's always that camaraderie between bandsmen. And I think that is something that is absolutely toxic in our culture, that at some point we have to address it.
Yeah, I agree, Michael. I think we're beyond it being rivalry, and now in it being kind of gang member like. So I agree. Cybil?
I thought Mike was going to take what I was going to say because I literally was going to start it off the same way. I'm getting feedback. But what I was going to say was to step outside of, I'm going to cultural wise, the camaraderie between sections is a long stay. It might be a different intensity. You know, back in the day, they might have done A, B, and C. These days, they're doing D, E, and F. But that camaraderie between sections and the processes that they may or may not go through, that seems to be something that's never going to change, no matter how much we stand up in front of them and be like, don't do that, like we didn't do it. That's going to be a constant. So it's just a matter of, I guess, give and take, monitoring and making sure that everything is on the up and up, but that's going to continue.
I like that one, Cybil, because those became our lifelong friends. Some of those people, like to date, 20 years later, 15, 20 years later, they're our best friends. They're the people that we still hang around. They're the people that we still gravitate to the most. I was going to come from an angle of relationship to band directors. We, across generations, whoever your band director was, unless it was not a positive experience, we loved them like a parent. You know, we love them, and there isn't anything that we wouldn't do for that person that helped shape us and through the most important part of our life, our young adulthood, early adulthood, into the adults we are now. I think that's such an important person for any human being on a musical journey, and one specifically HBCU bandom. You know, there isn't anything, sometimes even to a fault, that our band directors do that we would not forgive them for. It is almost unconditional for some of us when it comes to our band directors. And I think that's important to note, that this generation, they're gonna love their band directors, especially if their experience was positive. They're gonna love them, and they'll talk to their kids about them. They'll talk to their grandkids about that experience. And I think that's something that is never going away, and it shouldn't go away. And on the same vein, I was gonna talk about just the common experience of going through HBCU bandom is something that should stand the test of time. That as much as we think we're different, we're very much alike. I don't know why people in the SWAC think they're that much different than people from the MEAC or the SEAC or CIAA. You're not. You're really not. If you pull back all of the things that you think make us different, you're going to find the same things. You're going to find people, you're going to find band couples. You're going to find band fights where somebody didn't get along with so-and-so. You're going to find memories of food and fun. You're going to find those same things. And that's what I wish we saw more of. I think, I don't want to say it's lost, but I catch moments of it on social media where there's a picture and there's some drummers from different schools and they just kind of chopping it up and sharing that conversation back and forth in different styles and showing each other. I have one picture that's iconic that's like that. So that's going to stand the test of time. And I think we need to promote a little bit more of that, in my opinion. With that being said, This has been a good conversation. I got a whole lot of stuff going on. I got a new computer coming. And don't think that I have crappy technology. I think this is just what happens to the person who knows technology. I got a Mac, a Dell, a LCD screen, an iPhone, and an Android, and they've all failed me at least 1 week.
It's failing you right now because
all
you're freezing as you're doing this.
That's my point. I promise you, I have a new MacBook, a Dell, an Android. I have at least $5,000 worth of technology right in front of me, and a mic. And no matter what device I'm on, every Friday, one of them doesn't work, and I switch to the other one. I call that the devil. Listen, my family is from the South, and they are spiritual people. I think that that's going to happen, not because of what I'm using, but what's being said. We are sharing the good news, and we're sharing the difficult conversations with positivity and resolution behind it. Thank y'all for coming on the show. I love y'all. Y'all like my people, and we've all gone to 3 different. Lauren finally checked the right box. That's all I'm gonna say. I'll have to throw that jab in there. She gonna roll her eyes around. You checked the right box. Cybil like, I don't know.
Anyway, and speaking of the wrong box, Cybil, happy belated Charter Day.
Same to you, Sarah.
So Lauren, you just made that sound like she checked the wrong box with an organization. You gotta follow that up a little differently. Happy Charter Day to you, Cybil, from red team to blue team. And Michael just over there sitting there judging peasants. It's okay. It's okay. We know we're peasants. We know we are beneath.
Happy Charter Day, Cybil.
Thank y'all.
Without further ado, I love y'all. This was a good conversation. Our producer is at TMEA, and it's been kind of rocky. I want to go. Have y'all ever been to TMEA?
Yeah, I need to stay. I need to stay. If I ever plan on doing that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate y'all for coming on the podcast. If you haven't hit the like button, share button, definitely the like button. I get reamed out when y'all people tune in. Edwin always here, Lamix be here, and then y'all don't hit the like button. And listen, y'all hit the like button too. Michael, hit the like button. That's not for the audience too. Like, y'all know how social media and all this stuff, the algorithms work. If it doesn't have a certain amount of likes, then it just kind of gets buried. So hit them like buttons. So Jay, Julian, Luke is not berating me about what's going on. Without that being said, thank y'all. I appreciate y'all, and good night. Signing off.
I will do that for Krystal. Two phones, Williams. Sorry, I'm over his stuff.
I can't change my name for another 20 days. And I am going to change it to 2 phones because I think it's kind of dope. All right. Good night, y'all.